It's the beginning of our 31 comics of Halloween, and guess what we're starting off with?
I got this weird pain in my neck.
Could it be a vampire bite? Hello everyone and welcome back to Married with Comics. We are here to talk about our 31 comics of Halloween in front of our new haunted display. Before we get into the good stuff, first thing to announce is we have reached our 500 subscriber giveaway. So this Sunday at 4:30, we are going to do our live show. We are going to be there. We're going to give this away to someone who has not only subscribed, but has been commenting on videos. And we will do other giveaways for people who attend the live show. We will talk about some upcoming comics, and we'll answer some of your questions and have a lot of fun.
It's going to be cool.
Second thing is we are doing an ultimate challenge for 1,000 subscribers. So I can tell you that if we reach 1,000 subscribers by October 29th, there will be a slab in it for one lucky winner.
A slab?
A slab.
Oh my.
When I say I'm going to make the prize worthwhile, I don't joke around.
This lady means business.
So our 31 comics of Halloween.
Yes.
We were so excited to start covering these, and honestly, you can't do Halloween titles without starting with one of the most iconic monsters of all time.
Yeah, one of the originals, in my opinion, right?
Absolutely.
So no matter how you look at it, Bram Stoker's Dracula has been around for a long time in literature form, in movie form.
Absolutely.
You can go back to even silent film and see
Nosferatu.
Right? So this idea has permeated not only our culture, Vlad the Impaler, Elizabeth Ann Bathory, all the way back through history. And then we, being humans, took it and ran with it. And we're like, oh, that's scary. There are parts of it that could be based on actual people. But let's make it scarier, right? One of our favorites, I remember being like, very first memory I have is childhood, growing up. Hey, what do you want to be for Halloween this year? And I got out of the cutesy stage and finally was in somewhere in elementary school and told my grandmother I wanted to be a vampire when she got up out of the floor because it was the first scary creature thing that she'd ever heard me talk about and want to be. And she was like, how in the world? I don't even know what you're reading. What's going on here? So that's my earliest memory of vampires, is that they were the coolest monster out there, cool enough that, 8, 9-year-old me wanted to be one for Halloween.
We, of course, our costume ended up, you got the fangs and you had
teeth,
the dripping blood.
Nobody can talk right with when you're going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in college, I found one of the Halloween shops that had some of those really cool prosthetics that you could add to yourself. So I found a vampire bite. So I became a vampire victim for Halloween one year.
That's very cool.
That was so much fun.
That is cool.
Of course, in comic books, there are a lot of different kind of translations of vampires, but honestly,
yes.
We've got to start with how you take a TV series and how it's either started in comic books, or in these cases, the comic books came after the television series. So the first one for me is Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Like, oh my God.
Oh my gosh. So I love this series, and yes, I am like a diehard Buffy fan. I think that the first 5 seasons, that is where it should have ended in my world. That's as far as I watch. I've watched season 6. I still can't finish season 7. Maybe someday I will get there. But I at least have Scott slowly starting his way through the series.
Yes, and I am probably not near the fan that Laura is, but I am enjoying it. For one, now, of course, it's a throwback. So you look at the styles and the language and even some of the jokes, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember when. For the most part, the acting is really good. Some of my favorite people are in that show, and I was introduced to them in that show. Allison Hannigan, big fan of hers. Sarah Michelle Gellar, even. I knew who she was even way back then. I also knew her from a couple of other horror movies. I kind of fell in love with her in the live version of Scooby-Doo, first one.
Of course.
Which made me even more interesting and willing to go back and start watching Buffy when Laura was like, you must watch. But that being said, the series itself ended, and a lot of the fans, whether they liked the last seasons or not, were kind of like left wanting, right? It's like, no, give us more.
So this series is actually written by Joss Whedon.
Mm-hmm.
The way it was described to me, because as you all know, Dan over at Ultimate Comics in Raleigh, knowing that I was a diehard fan, I told him that I was incredibly hesitant to read any of the comics because I was afraid that they were going to continue in the direction of the series that I didn't like. And he said that this series was fixing a lot of the problems that a lot of people had with the series. Like,
Okay.
give it a try. So Scott managed to find like the complete set, which is like 7 different volumes for a great price at Ultimate Comics. There's good and bad. This series definitely reminds me why I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer as a series.
But why is it that you loved it?
You have all the interactions with the different characters, the little glib things in the gang of Scoobies that I loved from the original, and getting to see my favorite storyline that actually they haven't pursued as much, which is really sad. At one point, Faith and Giles are off sort of on their own separate adventure, and that one, seeing the two of them interact more, I'm like, I want more of that. So I missed a lot of that humor that was kind of instilled in the series. There were some directions that they took that I didn't like as much, but I still keep reading.
Mm-hmm.
If you like the TV series, I definitely recommend it. I haven't tried any of the other storylines that have been written by other writers, but so far, like I said, it has enough of a tip of the hat to the TV series that I read it, I enjoy it. Sometimes I'll take a break and I'll go back and make Scott watch a couple episodes.
Well, and so one of the things that I liked about the TV series, it's a love story too. The movie version was different. But the TV series version, it's about Buffy and Angel. Let's get down to it, right?
And Spike.
Yes. But I guess later on, that might be ahead of where I'm watching. However,
He's on season 2.
They never did the long drawn out parts between Buffy and Angel the way that they could have, that would have made me lose interest as a viewer. Meaning, yes, he's a vampire, but he's also not like the other vampires, but you get that pretty clearly, pretty quickly. And then when he turns bad, spoiler alert, he reverts back to being Angelus, the bad version of him without a soul. There is a clear, definitive line where that happens, and it happens in a 2-parter, but it's like 2 episodes, and you're back. They didn't take that and draw it out over weeks and weeks and weeks, and like, oh no, will they make it? Will he survive? Will he kill her? Will she kill him? Which would have driven me nuts.
I think that's the problem that I have is season 2 is one of my favorite seasons in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer realm, with the exception of season 5. Great seasons, but what I really liked about 2 was we had spent, the first season and a half of Angel's a good guy, and then suddenly everything flips, and now he is the villain of the season. That addition, that flip, how you take those characters that were kind of set up one way and now you change them into something else, I loved that. And that's not in the comics. So you do get those, fun kind of cameo moments where like Amy's there and Oz is there and all these other people that you recognize from the TV series. It's just, you never get that kind of amazing flip where the rug's kind of pulled out from under you and you find out who the key is, things like that. So I think that's part of my challenge with it. In comparison, what other TV series comic do we have?
Oh, I don't know, because there are a lot of them out there, but the one in particular is Penny Dreadful. It's a great series in a lot of ways. Don't get me wrong. There's a great cast. It's an interesting version of monster stories because you definitely have a vampire in it. That's kind of one of the key elements. But you also have, a young doctor who's trying to recreate life from body parts he's stealing from graves. Frankenstein?
Okay.
So you've got a lot of cool elements in the show that interact in some new ways. Like they don't reinvent the wheel, but they give you some different perspectives. Okay. All of that being said, I love the show. We haven't finished it yet, partly just because we have way too many things on our read and watch list.
For me, like I said, the show, I like the original Penny Dreadful stories. So I like the concept behind it. And I like the fact that they were trying to take all the classic monsters and put it all in one story. they do go a little, hypersexualized, hyperviolent, which
They make it for television.
Exactly.
It's like everything else right now.
It is definitely, a little over the top at times.
However, that being said, the book is kind of, it's a hard one for me because I like the story. It's not different at all from the like, if you're early on in season or if you haven't watched it yet, you could watch season 1 of Penny Dreadful and then read this book and see the obvious correlations. They're almost side by side. The thing I love about it is that it gives you a little bit more background in certain ways or a little sooner than the TV series does. And it has some really cool stuff. I'm going to give you some positives first. So in the back, there's an entire section where they talk about the creators. They talk about designing the vampires. They talk about how they wanted it to look overall. They interview, the creative team and talk about Vanessa, one of the main characters. There's a lot of really good meat in the back. But for the negatives, the artwork, I described it as a bit like a surrealist painting, but it's also where there's a representation of the character or the scene as opposed to like a lifelike depiction of it. But then it's also like it was done in watercolor and then you sprayed it with a water bottle and then you look at it. It is cool in the inkiness and the murkiness of it. They created a visual feel, 100%. They wanted you to jump at things in the shadows and not quite be able to make out what that is lurking. Did a great job. Problem is, every now and then, I wanted to be able to see what they were moving around in the panels, and you just can't. I know my eyesight's not what it used to be, but Laura's going to show you some of these close-ups. You can't really tell what's going on. And especially in some of the action sequences, there's an entire page there where I think they're being attacked by a vampire or possibly more than one vampire. And there are gunshots and multiple people in the room. And I have no clue who's doing what to who. It continues in that way throughout the entire thing. Every now and then you get a clear character page in a panel. But again, it's like you're looking through. I kept wanting to clean my glasses, because it looked to me like somebody had smeared Vaseline on my lenses and I was trying to read through them. So not my favorite art. It's beautiful. If you just simply look at it from an aesthetic point, it's riveting to look at. You turn the page and sometimes you're just like, oh, wow. But then I turn the page and I see that and I'm like, cool, I want to, wait, there's 3 people, or no, wait, was that a guy? Wait, is that a hand? And I just get lost in it, and it detracted to me from the story itself. That's my one and only really negative about it, because again, it moves along, it keeps you going, it gives you some background, it gives a lot of tie-ins to the series. It made me want to know more about some of the characters in the series, but it was very hard for me to just read and to look at and appreciate and kind of get drawn into, other than the fact that it did make me feel like I was sitting in a dark room the whole time with a candle.
So the next one is actually a series that came out this year. It's called Killadelphia. So we have Volume 1 and Volume 2 that have been released. Volume 3 is coming soon. This one is unique. The storyline starts with a seasoned police officer who is investigating all these murders. And he has a whole wall that he's trying to solve of these instances that are going on around Philadelphia. And suddenly he gets a call from one of his assets and they say, meet me at this building. I have information, come alone. He goes into the building and turns out that it is an ambush and he is killed. But he's not just killed, he becomes a vampire. So now his son, who's also a police officer, not as good of a detective as his father, at least has always lived in his father's shadow, comes to town for his father's funeral, and then starts trying to investigate the same crime that his father was trying to solve. And then he pieces together that there are vampires, and then he realizes that his father is basically sitting in the grave waiting to come out because he's also a vampire. So now you kind of have this father-son storyline that's going on of,
Okay, that's cool.
A little twist on your vampire story, but then they give the origin story of how vampirism started in Philadelphia. They actually tie it back to the American Revolution, which I did think was really interesting. So the idea is that Abigail Adams and John Adams went to the Caribbean caught, I think at the time they called it swine flu, came back and they had vampirism. But of course, back then they didn't know how to diagnose it. So they kind of quietly spread vampirism and were creating an army to then eventually take over Philadelphia. So volume 1 for me was like, it started really well and I liked the father-son bantering. There's one element in the storyline that they didn't flesh out and I was like, okay, well, let's see what happens. You know, maybe we'll get some answers in volume 2. I was definitely intrigued and I jumped straight to volume 2. Volume 2, what I loved is you get more of Abigail Adams, and she is the reason that I'm going to continue reading to volume 3, because you do not mess around with that woman. Even if you only know the historical context of Abigail Adams, she's a brilliant woman, but in this series, oh yeah. So that little thread, which if any of you have read this series, you know, leave a comment. I'll put a spoiler alert and, you know, we can talk about that one thread that's kind of bugging me, because it disappeared for like the first 3/4 of volume 2. So suddenly we don't get any answers and then that thread jumps back in and I still really don't understand how it's tying into this vampires historical, we're going to take over, and then you kind of have a war within Philadelphia. So that's the only thing that I'm assuming they're going to answer in volume 3, but I kind of wish they'd left that one whole thread out.
Which I'm interested now in reading that one more, that I hear is kind of a different origin story, and I did not realize that they used a historical kind of point to bring out introduce vampirism.
Did you know that Scott and I are going to be reading this series? And you know why? Because we are going to be talking with BJKicks about volume 1 on whatever date I'm going to put at the bottom of this screen.
There we go. You and I learned about this at the same time. Welcome to my world.
Aren't you glad you want to read the series now?
I am glad that I want to read it. It brought me to a point, though, so in literature, one of my all-time favorite book series, and I'm not sure if the author's name is correct, but I want to say Brian Lumley, Lumley. Laura can look it up and verify.
That sounds right.
It's the Necroscope series. The premise of the Necroscope is that he can speak to the dead, but in doing so, he discovers a whole other world and vampires and their existence, but it's completely different from pretty much, at least at the point in time that those books came out, when I read them originally, very different from every other origin story I'd ever heard. Everybody else was like, oh, somebody cursed God, or son of Satan, or, you know, there's a lot of different versions that involve, like, you know, kind of a possession or a demonology or a rotting of your soul in order to become, you know, a vampire. The first one, the originator. This one, no, they have their entire own planet. They come from a different place. They come here, they use us like cattle. And they do it well and smartly enough to hide themselves so they can continue to do it. Very cool. And then there's a whole separate series that he goes into as a spinoff where it's like the war back on their planet and what happened and how the first ones came here. So
you'll have to let us know how you think Killadelphia compares when we talk to BJKicks about that.
I definitely plan to. But look that series up if you're interested and you love vampires as much as we do. It's fantastic. I had to. The last one that we're going to talk about is another character that is very popular and has been done in various different iterations, Van Helsing. So typically you hear the name Van Helsing, but you immediately think, or at least I immediately think of, like kind of a rough and tough badass German. I usually picture him with a monocle. I don't know why. Maybe that was in one of the stories, but vampire hunter, right? A man who's almost as possessed as Dracula himself, but his focus is strictly to destroy him and to hunt the creature and end it, right? Well, Zenescope, being one of our favorite titles for the reasons that you all know and love, took Van Helsing, tweaked it just a bit, and came up with Liesel Van Helsing, the daughter of Van Helsing. First of all, she's a badass. Second of all, she's a badass that kind of has steampunk
Definitely.
Look to her. She's got the top hat with the goggles. I mean, she's got a crossbow. I could go on and on about just her and the fact that she's so cool and fun to read, and her quips and her kind of snarkiness. She's not on the level of Zenescope's Robin Hood, in my opinion.
Robin Hood's hysterical.
But they do actually have crossover events from time to time, and you put the two of them in a panel together, and I'm in. Period. It's like watching one of the best comedy action hero pair-ups. Take your pick. You know, if you're a Tango and Cash fan, if you're whatever, Eddie Murphy, that's what they are to me in females.
So, interesting tidbit before I get into the character of Liesl Van Helsing, and of course this story of Van Helsing versus Dracula. If you have watched, there is a TV series called Van Helsing, and you will see in the introduction that it says based on the story created by Zenescope.
Exactly.
However, nothing in that television series is using any of the characters that are created by Zenescope. So in the comic book, the reason that she has these steampunk elements is she's actually from London, and she does end up time traveling, and she's now kind of stuck in our modern world. So that's why, you know, back, you know, in her original time period, she was an inventor. She was always kind of trying to create these different tools to then hunt vampires. What they did is they start you with the kind of introduction to Liesl Van Helsing in Helsing.
The Darkness and the Light.
And with this, we then kind of continue the other half of the series in Van Helsing versus Dracula. What I love about this series is if you are a general fan of Dracula, the movies or the books, so if you remember, you know, Mina Harker and Jonathan and some of those Lucy, some of those other characters that, again, you recognize, what they do with this is they're giving all those characters a modern twist. And then they're trying to give them a new kind of basis. So Mina isn't just the hapless female that, you know, is constantly sort of more of a victim and is being seduced by Dracula. Yeah. Instead, it gets really, really interesting. And there is some fun little ties, like I said, to the original story that if you've read Dracula and you're a fan, you're going to like some of the twists. If you've never really kind of like obsessed over Dracula, movie, book, whatever, you're still going to enjoy the story. So this kind of pairing, that was one of my favorite Van Helsing stories. Eventually, she does take on other classic monsters, but this one is the best.
I love the artwork. Again, Zenescope always knocks it out of the park to me. I love the character development because they're never one-dimensional, and it's you know, it's vampires. I'm just saying, whenever you throw a vampire into the mix, you know that you're going to have a continuation of some kind because it's like they never die. I don't care. I'm sorry. You never really trust that they're gone because somewhere somebody got bit, scratched, somebody's hiding someplace.
You mean the zombie double tap doesn't work?
It does not, unfortunately. Yeah. Well, fortunately for me, because I'm a fan of the genre.
Do you have a favorite, or are you still looking for your favorite?
So Penny Dreadful was definitely not it for me. Van Helsing is very high on my list. Killadelphia now is sneaking into contention spots because of just the fact that I'm very intrigued to go into that origin story now, even more so.
I haven't found my favorite yet. The Zenescope Van Helsing series, there are some great stories within it, and there are some that I could literally spend about 30 to 45 minutes dictating exactly how many different ways it went wrong. For that series, I have some moments that I'm still even hesitant to continue with it. I like the Buffy the Vampire series, but I doubt I'm ever going to reread it. So I don't know that I found like the vampire series yet. Killadelphia is pretty good.
What about you guys? Do you have a favorite vampire series in comic books, or character, or writer? Let us know in the comments below. Is there something that we've completely missed? Because I know there's a lot out there, and we really kind of had to narrow our focus for these videos. So there are other things even on our shelf that we have that have vampires in it.
And oh darn, we could maybe cover those next year. So if you have some great recommendations of vampire series, definitely put it down in the comments. We definitely want to be reading those. And stay tuned because we have much, much more. So we're talking demons and ghosts and monsters and...
Look, hair standing up. That's cool.
There's some cool stuff
And huge shout out, by the way, to my lovely wife who not only came up with this idea herself, but completely and totally put it together. I mean, I had an eensy bit of input on something with it, but this is all her. So if you guys like it, let her know. She worked hard on it, and I think it looks amazing. It's even more impressive up close. I hope she has some close-up shots that she shared in the video.
There's a whole separate video, yeah.
So there
with
you
some
go.
close-ups.
If you like it, check out the other video, because you can come up with a lot of this stuff yourself. And definitely it's adding to the ambiance, because I'm sitting here doing this video and it's just like it's fall, it feels great, it's Halloween, I want to be in a costume. Who knows, maybe one of those will make an appearance in the video coming up. Maybe not, we'll see. Stay tuned though.
Stay tuned. We have a lot of goodies coming, and don't forget, so we have a video coming up with BJKicks.
Yes.
Information down below. We have a live show on the Kraken's Hoard where we are doing a fundraiser for the channel.
Yep.
We are also helping them sell some comic books. So
we got to push to the ultimate 1,000 subscriber giveaway.
Because, like I said, there's a slab in there for some lucky winner. We will talk to you all again very, very soon. And have a great day, everyone.